Hi, this is David from Mondlicht Studios, and I want to talk about a project we did with the Wunderwaffe, an agency from Munich, and you can see Charlotte and HP right here. You will hear HP's voice in the video later. Wonderful people, absolute joy to work with. The client is Bergader, a German cheese manufacturer, a pretty big one. You can buy their cheese everywhere in Germany, and of course I enjoyed their products before they became our client. But I want to give you a quick breakdown of the project. It's a TV commercial, also used online. So we have two different versions of the spot. Today I will show you the 15-second version. This is the online spot, and because it's German, I want to give you a quick translation of what's happening. So this is no storyboard, it's just for you so you know what's going on. In the beginning we have the light shed on the ground, and you hear the door squeaking and someone saying to his child, let's have a look, and you hear footsteps in the snow, and HP is telling you also in the mountains, so they say you can make a wish when you see this shooting star, but don't tell anyone. Of course you see a shooting star, so make your wish please. And discover your Bergader is the translation for Entdecke deine Bergader, which is the slogan of the company, and of course best wishes for 2020. So let me just quickly play the spot for you.
Lass uns mal schauen.
Wenn du eine Sternschnuppe entdeckst, kannst du dir etwas wünschen, heißt es auch bei uns in den Bergen. Aber du darfst niemandem von deinem Wunsch erzählen. Entdecke deine Bergader und ein wundervolles 2020. Alles Gute.
So this is the 15-second version. The 25-second version will be televised on the first TV channel in Germany on the 31st of December, right before the main news, 8 p.m. So if you have a chance to tune in, you should, but we will publish the video of course as well. And now let me give you some insights on the project. This is Dima's wonderful matte painting, and I will just quickly click through the layers. We have all the mountains on separate layers, so we can combine them later in 3D. And to get even more depth in there, we have some haze layers and more mountains and more haze, and the foreground mountain also with this little barn door opening. Later in the 25-second version you will see why we needed this. And some foreground hills, and what's missing here is the most foreground with the light and the door opening and closing. So this was rendered in 3D because it's too close to make a good painting for this. Also with animated light and stuff, it makes no sense to do this as matte painting, so this was 3D production. And now that you have seen the layers, this is the scene we put together with some modeling to get even more 3D effect in there. We have our camera movement. This is the foreground you didn't see in the matte, so a lot of displacement. Let me quickly grab the shader. This is just some noise for the snow structure, and this is a ramp to combine with another ramp which looks like this to put some footprints on the ground, which results in this final image you can see right here. And let me just push play so you can see this is the camera movement. Of course it's just the Maya viewport in this case to get everything done. Also what I want to show you is this nice little comet and a shooting star we have right here. So if I push play now, this is a fluid simulation in Maya. This is the fluid container, and it's really slow because the resolution is quite high for the calculation. So let me just set this down to like 60, 15, 15, and now I push play, and you can see it doesn't look as nice as it's in the final rendering, but you can get an idea of what's going to happen. Since I didn't cache this, this is calculated live. Later for the rendering you have to do some caching for the fluid object, so the rendering can take place and everything is calculated properly. And I will just quickly jump ahead and push play, and now poof, wrong calculation, but it doesn't matter. You can see what's going to happen anyway. So, okay, we're getting back to where we want to. And here you see the shooting star shooting through the scene and along this line, which has also been rendered later as one layer, so we can make the trail for the comet, for the shooting star. And yeah, this is the 3D scene with a nice little comet, and the moon has been put on an extra layer, which is right about here, because we weren't sure where the moon was gonna be. This is almost the exact position where the moon will be on the 31st of December, but it would be somewhere like here. But from an artistic point of view, I think it's okay to push it a little bit to the left. It just makes the better composition in the end, and because of that the moon has been also rendered separately, so we have the whole matte painting as one pass. The sky has also been rendered separately, but all the foreground together makes up one rendering in this case. Now let me quickly jump to the fusion composition and take a look at some of the renderings. So rendering in 4K, of course, for better anti-aliasing, for less artifacts, for faster render times in terms of quality. You don't have to crank up the quality like super crazy if you render a little bit bigger and scale it down in the end, but of course you have to take care of some details. For example, if you use the resize node in Fusion or in any other program, you should take care that you have not like a super sharp resize algorithm, but a little smoother. Of course, it's an animation, so we have motion blur and depth of field later in there, so it doesn't really, it's not really necessary to make this like super sharp. We have the masks, of course, in this case. We could also have done this in Fusion 3D, but in this case we had set up everything in Maya already with the camera movement, so it was really easy just to render out the frames, since there's no complicated calculation. It's a few seconds per frame, so that wasn't really the problem. Additionally, we have some gradients for the sky to get the masks for better adjustment. So we have our main pass, and after some color correction the sky looks like this, and then there's even more color correction from left to right and some in the foreground, and so on and so on. And finally, here is the foreground rendering. Let me go to some frame where this is working and also repath my files correctly. No, I don't. Okay, so this is the rendering in 32 bits, so including color correction, and merge this over the main frame. Let's wait for Fusion to compute the result. So there we go, and this is the final frame. And Fusion, finally, we did some more details in After Effects. Some motion blur was applied and some noise on top there. For CG animation, if you just render out your animation and you don't use any noise, it looks really unnatural. So I always recommend using noise, but not like super crazy. It's animation at night, so we could have used a lot of noise because it would be a little bit more realistic, but you always try to get rid of noise when you use a camera. You try to add noise when you create CG animation. So in this case we had to add some noise later. And now let me show you the After Effects project. Not really a lot happening in After Effects except for the shooting star, which has been put in there in After Effects as well. So we have our main star, we have some very slight glow. Let me go to full resolution. We have this slight glow, and then we have the different trails of the comet, some glow, and since this is happening really fast with some motion blur, this makes up the final result. And now let's walk you through the process from start to the end, because you now have seen the final result. And this is where it all started, with an idea, with a very lonely and cool environment. This is the image the client sent us, and to get a better feeling for what the client wants, we put together this first rough layout with some barns or ski huts in there, and just pulled it from left to right to get a better feeling for how long you can talk, what you can say, the full length of the animation, what is going to happen. So at this point there haven't been made any decisions for the camera movement, also not for the audio track, so this is the first rough draft for the creative people to make up a text and to work on the length of the animation, and really just to get a better imagination. The next animatic is already more 3D. This was a very early stage of the mat. Let me show you. Looks something like this when Dima started to create the mat, and very slow camera movement, just some snow on there, and this was too overcrowded for the client. We have this super neat little snowman, but it's very you start to look at him and then you see the spot only once in television. We didn't want any objects in there that would distract from the key message, so too overcrowded and also too cozy, not lonely enough. So the next step of the mat was already much closer to the final result, and let me show you this one. And right here we already have some sound in there. The first draft from HP. Here you can see the smoke isn't moving, the shooting star isn't happening, there are just some notes in the video. The moon isn't working at all, it's just totally flat 2D panning once again, but including the foreground in this case as a first test, with some footprints in there. And right here we have different options for the camera movement. So really a lot of different options, like fly through the scene, but we wanted this first person feeling as well. You hear the snow steps on the ground, so the camera shouldn't just fly through the scene. The final camera right here was the choice of the client, so look up in the beginning, but what's missing here is still those footsteps and a little more camera shake and movement. The looking around is working really well. There's no shooting star, just a very tiny white ball, I don't know if you saw it, flying through the scene, so it's also just about timing and camera movement. So at this point we adjusted the camera to, let me just put a more eye-pleasing shader on there, so there we go. We have this camera movement and you see this shaking right here in the beginning. I can also show you the camera with some graphs that you see what's happening. So to get some kind of a natural movement, this really looks like crazy stuff is happening, but all those animations together in this case make up the final camera movement. And I just hit play one more time. This is the final 50 frames per second camera movement for the full length animation, and right now I'm just playing every frame, so I have to set this to 50 frames per second. And again, let's push play. So the final animation looks like this. We have camera shaking, and now the camera is looking around, and barn door is opening. Now some cow is mooing, and you see the shooting star and all that stuff together. And finally the camera drifts off to the right to make up the final composition. Also you see, as I told before, no moon in here, right here, and the barn has been rendered separately. So all this together makes up the final spot. And let's get back to the process. Here you can see the final camera movement, very rough, in very low quality. Of course, this doesn't take much time to render, and just to talk to the client if this is what they are imagining. Also, the shooting star is not color corrected in any way. So next step was to focus on the foreground and the opening shot with the sound.
Lass uns mal schauen. Komm, Großer, lass uns mal schauen. Okay. Komm, Großer, lass uns mal schauen. Okay.
And so on and so on. And the next preview is this one. And this nailed the animation for the door in the beginning. I will just push pause right here and show you how this was done. This is the animation of the door. It doesn't look as you imagine it to be, but this setup makes this very hard light edge on the left and a much softer edge on the right. That's what the client was wishing for. If I just had put those two barn doors next to each other, you wouldn't see this difference in the shadow. That's because this light is very close to this obstructing object, and in this case we get a very soft shadow on the right, and this door is really much closer to the final surface. So in this case we get a much sharper shadow on the left with the same amount of shadow spread or shadow angle. This is Arnold in this case. So this has some softness in there. Also, we just put the final matte paint as an environment and also some light with a texture, so we get the final result you can see here. Of course, this is with some color correction. Told you about the displacement in the foreground. So all in all, this is the final door animation. And let me open up the Arnold Preview, calculate, and here you can see immediately, not with much displacement, but you can get a feel for it. And here you can see what's happening and how this is working. So open and finally close. Here's the camera. Let me just close this, and you can see how the camera is moving around and what's happening, and finally it flies off. So this is our final spot.
Lass uns mal schauen.
Wenn du eine Sternschnuppe entdeckst, kannst du dir etwas wünschen, heißt es auch bei uns in den Bergen. Aber du darfst niemanden von deinem Wunsch erzählen. Entdecke deine Bergader und ein wundervolles 2020. Alles Gute.
And we also wish you all the best for 2020.